You move towards, they move back. You ask them questions about what they did over the holidays. They give seemingly feels like avoidant answers. What is this? The Twilight Zone? No. You may have encountered someone that has an avoidant or insecure attachment style. There's no right or wrong way to put it. Everyone was raised differently. And that can be good in certain aspects. In other aspects, it can simply be different. The key in my digital wellness practice, where I work with people that are stress eaters, food addicts, and emotional eaters, is when dealing with and interacting with people that have these different attachment styles begins to cause stress. And that stress in turn causes a person to seek various coping mechanisms. So if you are one of those people, then continue watching today's episode to learn more about attachment styles and how to navigate them for the sake of your own heart. Let's talk about identifying the traits of insecure, anxious attachment styles and dive briefly into its origins. By the time you listen to this, you will begin to understand where these patterns came from. And hopefully, if you are either in a relationship with or forced to interact with a person that has this attachment style in the workplace, you will gain a deeper source of empathy and understanding for where this sprang from. Now, the traits of insecure, anxious attachment style include feeling uncomfortable when you're in physical proximity to the person. The closer you are, the more they begin to back away. Other areas include trust. If, for example, you need to trust them for a project and you find on one end of the spectrum that you gave them an assignment and they just simply chose to do the entire project themselves. On one end, this can feel like massive levels of proactivity and productivity. Who wouldn't want that, right? But on the other hand, there's a chance that the person in the past has never been able to confidently depend on anyone when given a task. Therefore, as a protective coping mechanism, they choose to take all aspects of a project on for themselves. Now, once again, there is no right or wrong attachment style. The key here is just simply being able to recognize what the differences are. And understanding the root source and origins of these attachment styles allows us to gain greater and deeper empathy and understanding their patterns so that you can have a comfortable, safe, trusting, secure interaction with the person. Let's go. An insecure, anxious attachment style affects stress levels and coping mechanisms in so many ways, both for those people that have this in their journey, as well as those around them until they begin to learn and recognize the patterns, values, and belief systems. Let's dive a little bit deeper into this. A anxious and attachment style, they are very concerned and reluctant to experience others getting close to them. They worry that their partners and their coworkers may, once they get to know them, find that they're not as lovable, that they're not as likable once they truly get to know them, that they won't be able to count and depend upon them. They do desire closeness. They desire to merge with another person, to confide in another person. But at the same time, they're kind of torn. It's almost like two people on opposite sides, one pulling in one way and another person pulling on the opposite side in another way. And this cognitive dissonance It scares them away. And unfortunately, because a person with an insecure, anxious attachment style feels like this is going to be a self-fulfilling prophecy, sadly, it turns other people away as well. And when this happens, they feel as if, yep, see, a little voice whispers in their ear saying, I told you that you weren't lovable. This is why you should not have confided in this person. You should not have trusted in this person. And the process and the cycle repeats itself again and again and again. In turn, they live with a constant state of stress levels. In a research study conducted years ago, the cortisol levels were measured of people that had an insecure, anxious attachment style. And they found that their cortisol levels were in a constant state of elevated stress. And this is because they constantly have this fear and concern that if they were to open up, if they were to get close and allow people in, they'd find that they're not likable. It doesn't mean that this thought is true. Let's talk about the relationship between food, emotional eating, and anxious attachment style. Previously, I mentioned that the anxious attachment style usually is very reluctant to get close to anyone. They'd like to, they legitimately would love to, but they worry that their partner, their friends, their coworkers may not want to stay once they begin to truly see their thoughts, their opinions, their personal philosophy and outlook on key issues in life. For some people with an anxious attachment style, it even goes as far as, what if they discover that the way that I eat is different from theirs? What if they discover that the food that I enjoy is not like theirs? These are the constant whispers that occur for someone that has an anxious attachment style. And rightfully, this is why their cortisol levels, according to research studies, are so elevated and so high. Let's dive a little bit more into the emotional eating aspect in terms of how the anxious attachment style fuels emotional eating and food addiction. Really, what we're looking at here is it's cyclical. The anxious attachment style, when confronted and faced with certain situations that make them feel uncomfortable, where they have to turn involuntarily the microscope from the outside in, it causes a chain reaction. First comes the negative thought, which is rather intrusive. Then comes the stress response. When the anxious attachment style succeeds in weathering the storm of said situation, for example, as a reward for those people that are vulnerable to stress eating, emotional eating, food addiction, as a reward, the outcome is that binge eating cycle. Now, if you are not a stress eater, if you are not an emotional eater, but you have and engage in some kind of coping mechanism, you can easily replace stress eating with stress drinking or stress, you fill in the blank. And it becomes, if you're unaware of it, a cycle. They weather the storm of their anxiety filled negative thoughts. As a reward, in the next step, they wind up binge eating to calm down any remaining negative emotions and thoughts that happened over the course of that day or that week. The key here in terms of how to address this is finding and identifying which situations trigger the most negative thoughts and negative whispers, and utilizing certain tools to neutralize these negative thoughts. This way, you help the person that is struggling with anxious attachment be able to see themselves more realistically in a whole picture instead of almost a shattered mirror approach.